Hey guys, so we're just going to do a quick little run through here of a recent Naxx speedrun that happened here on Whitemane Classic Era. And I'm really encouraged to see how this group has continued to progress. We're talking about Bearbulance. He has been running some speedruns. It's a little hard for me to keep track of all his different runs. There's like the Deduction run, not the Deduction run, so I'm just going to call them Bears runs, right? That's kind of what they are. He's pushing for sub-hour pace at this point where they're introducing more and more tech, and I just want to kind of talk about how that's going, some of the tech, and what ultimately caused this run to fail. I mean, did they kill KT and have a decent rate overall? Sure, but they failed the speed run. They wiped, so we'll look into where they wiped and why. So they don't do any tech at the start, no fancy gigapulls, nothing like that. First piece of tech is here, their Fairlina skip. They have a paladin that runs out to the side with a Petri, brings all of the mobs to the side while they run in. This goes well. It's clean. I do feel like Fairlina got a little bit close in the middle here. Maybe it's not a huge deal. You got room. The idea is the casters aren't right next to all the melee, so I get it, but it scares me a little bit when you start getting more towards the middle of this room. So while this is happening, the next piece of tech is being laid down. Logan is doing probably the hardest piece of tech that actually takes some skill. The rogue kite to grab all the trash upcoming here is definitely something that takes a bit of practice. So it's nice that they have someone that knows how to do that in this raid. It's one of those things that doesn't cost the raid a whole ton of danger for this skip. And if it fails, oh well. But if it works, it's a nice like 20, 30 seconds potentially saved, how they're just able to rocket boots and all run straight down the middle here. Not have to worry about any gargoyle packs or anything. So everything is stacked over there. After the rogue dies, everything goes back into place, but they're already through. So you see like one or two people that dipped into the slime. Obviously not the best thing to do, kind of scary. Wold gets really low because he gets double, triple hit. So they're 38 manning Mexna right now. One thing to note is what they lost. I'm not sure if it matters here. When the boss is engaged, it looks like that Lonely was able to get back in the instance, so they were able to keep all 3 paladin buffs, I think? Yes, so that's kind of huge. Sometimes it feels like when the paladin leaves the instance, you can like lose your one blessing. So the fact that they were able to have King's Might and Salve is kind of huge. So that Spider Wing was really well done. There wasn't the slightly riskier tech pulls of doing the Giga pulls. And yeah, I think it went really well. So that's a good example of how Spiderwing is supposed to be. Again, we could look at some more individual stuff, but I'm trying to keep this really high level and just like a quick little run through. So this next piece of tech, again, goes pretty well. They do a good job separating the groups. I feel like there might have been some healers that were getting a little bit, no, they're all doing a good job. Nicely split up. You're just watching the health pools here. Do you ever see any casters taking damage? That's kind of the fear. If you ever see that, that's a problem. Almost looked like they all got stunned here, right? This one did a stun kind of right in the middle of all of them, it almost looked like. But anyways, they just continue going down. And just one thing to note is as far as Death Wish timer goes, so they use Death Wish on Mexna. After that Death Wish, the next one you have to pop early into Hygen. You don't want to save it. So as soon as you engage with Hygen, that's when you want to use the Death Wish, basically. If you save it towards the end of the fight here, it's not ending up being up for Lotheb, so that's a problem. So early Death Wish on Hygen next time by everyone. And now we're into Death Knight Wing. Good example of how Plague Wing's supposed to go. So 2 wings have been clean. They do a good job of keeping things moving here while they have their Spore debuff still active. Healers were unable to heal for parts of that, but they had some healers that weren't having the Lotheb debuff, so they were able to keep the raid moving. This is an example of a good raid group. So they accidentally pull 3 different packs here at once. Not super risky, but these little ads drop threats. They can just kind of one-shot healers. You see a lot of love fools going down here. They don't need to send a whole ton of AoE shots or anything, but I mean, I swear that's like 10, 15 love fools right there. That was an impressive amount. So lots of dummies and love fools. Like, that's insane, which is good. It's insane in a good way. I do get a little concerned seeing that amount before Vesuvius. If you're going this fast, if you're doing the Steed tech in the future, you really don't want to be having a whole ton of dummies going out before Vesuvius, just to be a little bit safer. Because if you do the Steed pull, you're not going to have lips either. So Vesuvius really just comes down to having available dummies if something goes wrong. But Vesuvius did not go wrong. It was a good Vesuvius. Axes, easy peasy, no problems in that weapon room. So they are doing Gothic skip here. And I'm seeing a good amount of disarms and control of those ghouls, which is what you want to see. So they did have to pull a patrol, which is not ideal, but at least they owned it, and they get the gargoyles. So this is an example of a good Gothic skip. Looks like no one died, and it felt pretty controlled. They were able to kill 1 set of gargoyles. In a Giga speedrun, ideally you'd want to kill 2 sets of gargoyles in that area, because they do end up having to kill 1 set there, but oh well. Getting that patrol kind of griefs things. So I couldn't tell here. I think Bearbulance dies here, right? Yeah, so Rip Bearbulance, that's a classic spot to have deaths. Really frustrating as a tank to die there. And I think that is what set up for Horsemen to be a little bit different than planned. I tried to look at the assignment sheet. We'll take a look at that in a second, and it didn't really seem to match what actually happened. So again, I don't have all the context here because I wasn't in this raid, but what happens there is that Shade absolutely owns everyone. They all get hit by it that first volley while they're already all taking damage. So the healers are just kind of stressed right now. They're not focusing as well as they should be on the tanks. And you see Bearbulance just doesn't get the amount of heals that he should receive. His health just ticks down there. In the future, I think the biggest gamer play would be as soon as a paladin sees this engaged, a paladin is up front and they just hodge it. Gives the time to flip it around. 99% sure that spirit can be hodged. There's a couple that can't in Death Nightwing, but I'm pretty sure that one can. And in general, like, just stun these schools. I'm going to take a wild guess that the rogues did not kidney there. I don't want to speak too much ill will towards the rogues, so we'll just take a quick look at that. See how many kidneys were cast in general over the course of this raid. This log is a little bit griefed here, where it also has an AQ40 log attached to it, so it takes me a little bit more to get it set up properly. But if we look at kidney shots here, did they cast them? Yeah. Mostly on Gothic, though. Logan did a good job. You can't see me, though. Did not stun either one of those ghouls in that area. So yeah, a little unfortunate to lose a main tank there, and then I think that sets up the fight to be differently than how it portrayed here. Here it looks like that Bear is second Zeliek, and if you look at the rotation of how the fight actually happened, it didn't really seem to happen exactly that way. So we'll just watch the replay. Because on here it says Emra first, Zeliek, and Bear second. But in reality, if we look at the replay, I think Real Talk is a different person than Emra, because Emra's in the raid, right? Yeah, Emra's a different character, so I don't see Real Talk on there, and maybe that contributed to the confusion as far as like the healer rotation and that stuff. My understanding is that it's always supposed to be set healers that are following a certain tank around. Because Bear died, maybe that threw things off. But what threw things off as well is having a mage die on the opener. on Zeliek. So Real Talk is bringing it in position. A little bit confused here. Looks like it chases Englaive, so Englaive runs it deep. I guess Englaive might have just hit it too early. We'll look at Real Talk's rotation in a second here. But yeah, Zeliek was not happy with Englaved in the opener. So just kind of a weird start with that mage ripping threat. And then because of that, it gets too close to all of the casters. They lose a mage early on. Losing a mage during that burn part of Zeliek is really bad. One thing I note as well is that I don't see any melee DPS starting on Zeliek. Maybe that's how it's supposed to be, because I don't know, it's like a little bit easier that way, but you don't really save a whole ton of time overall compared to just doing the normal strategy if you're not going to burn Zeliek with 1 or 2 melee on it. So I really feel like that if you're doing the cleave strat, you got to send at least 1 melee DPS in on Zeliek as well. Otherwise, it's just kind of a waste. It's taking them a lot longer to kill Zeliek because the casters were basically non-existent at the start. So let's take a look at Real Talk's opener there. Casts, Real Talk, events. So he does open up correctly. I mean, BT, Heroic Strike. I don't think that you want to be shield blocking though. I don't know why he's cleaving. Lipping? Uh, if you were a tank, you don't want to have a lip shout macro only. You want to have a shout macro and lip separately, so you don't do this ever. Very questionable start. I would not have a shield on tanking Zeliek. I think that's going to end up being the biggest thing that is confusing me, is seeing that shield block cast early on like that and then a cleave. Very strange. So probably panicked. Something was not right for sure. Look at damage done. Yeah, so parried the BT. That's a big part of it. Just had nothing to start, and then kind of panicked. So that makes more sense, but this is ultimately what cost the run. So making sure that the tank doesn't die to ghouls, because ultimately that one death on the tank caused the whole raid to fall apart. So yeah, Bear's probably a little tilted now. So here they're going for the slime skip, which, as a speedrun is always about testing your limits and trying to see the absolute max that you can do. But personally, if I see multiple mage deaths, I would never do the slime skip. You just can't trust the mages then. They're useless. One thing too there, it looks like LFA accidentally went in the slime. So making sure that you correctly jump over the first one and then blink over the second one is important. They're only at like 3.5 mages now because LFA is already going into this. So what sounds like happens is that star tank, I don't think that's Bearbulance at this point. Whoever has that mark over their head with Star Shield, it looks like. They were too far back. So everyone's running in and Shield's a little bit back here. Almost looks like he was applying weapon stones or something. But I think he's just tanking those ads. But he wasn't there to AoE shot properly. So there was no AoE shot that happened at the start of this pull. I also see a lot of fears going out. People want to have fear ward applied going into this pull. If a fear doesn't go out, maybe you'll save it for Gluth. But either way, as soon as you are finishing up the previous wing going into A-bomb, that's when you start calling out, hey, dwarfs, you need to be fear warding everyone that is not a warrior. And really, even fear warding the main tank is good because they're not always going to be able to Zerker Rage. But yeah, so this is where it falls apart. The tank is distracted, picking up mobs in the back. No AoE shot happens in the front. A mage is down with mana. They only have like 2 mages with buffs. They just don't have the caster capabilities to deal with what's going to happen here. So when you do the slime skip like that, you all jump across, you kill this pack as melee, and then the casters have to kill the slimes behind you. You see Naizu just not with the program there. So it just felt like that they're just not used to this circumstance. And again, that's The great thing about Era is that you're going to get more practice with this, and hopefully it'll go better in the future. I see a lot of Love Fools going into this pack. Normally I would expect to see more Love Fools here. I only see like 2 or 3. Okay, 5, 6. There's a fair amount. Okay. It felt like those slimes were just trickling in super hard. But yeah, this is the run. Rip. We'll just watch the wipe as it unfolds here from Koopa's perspective on the ground. And yeah, he kind of called it. Definitely recommend checking out Koopa's viewpoint of this. It's always good to listen from someone that knows what's going on. And it's like slowly dawning on him where he's like, if they don't move, if they don't kill this is a wipe. So it falls apart really quickly here. You see all these slimes, they're just not getting killed fast enough. I feel like paladins as well can be a big factor in just doing that first little bit of pump. Follow the paladins right there. Do a Holy Wrath, put down Exorcism, that kind of stuff. Maybe they're just so worried about the chaos in front of them because of how things were falling apart. But yeah, this is just a really risky pull. So they are just not able to finish off like 3 or 4 slimes. They walk forward because there's nowhere else to go. And at this point, I don't think that anyone actually socialed that next monstrosity pack from what I can tell. It looks to me what happens is it's these slowly moving slimes on the ground here. So those green belchers, when they're in combat, they will put down a bile sludge. And those bile sludges have huge aggro radiuses. They like call for help. So I don't think anyone was close enough to that pack there. But what happened is those bile sludges, they called for help and they aggroed those packs that were super far away. So as soon as that happens, it's a wipe. And they did a good job of having a lot of people petri and get out of the run. So was it the worst run ever after this? No, it actually was pretty good. They got back in 20 minutes later after everyone's back in the instance. And it's just a finishing up Naxx clear sort of thing. Really much to highlight here, besides the fact I was shocked at how strong their damage was for Saf. So a surprising amount of people kept their buffs. I think they only had 1 air phase, which is shocking. Like they called out for everyone to early Death Wish, and the early Death Wish actually worked. Normally, with a raid like this, fair amount of people that had lost buffs, kind of surprised at the level of damage. This was interesting to see. Another interesting thing to see was how fast KT fell apart from looking clean. So 50% left, 40%. This is a really clean. It's only Feck that forgot where the ground is. So he's getting reacquainted with the ground. But besides that, everyone is feeling comfy. Boss is at 25%. And watch how things fall apart here when that mind control happens. So Shield and Emra are kind of fighting for it there. It's kind of bouncing all around between. So now Shield's holding it. Emra's backing off. But not really. Like it's... But yeah, it falls apart really quick here. They just don't have that same health pool when you lose buffs. I'd be curious to know how many people repopped a Frostpot during this fight. I'm not sure when the Frost Blast, if they like tried to time it and do a Frostpot in preparation for a Frost Blast, but yeah, they get an unlucky one right here on this group. And it goes from being clean at 25% to at 5% very not clean. So they get hit by a block on a melee group, and then that volley goes out, and suddenly there's only like 20 people left alive. So just another example of how quickly KT can turn from good to bad, and why you want to be able to survive as long as possible in that fight to be able to deal with the end when it's actually crazy. So just a little bit of yap, talking about Naxx, my favorite instance. Hopefully you got something out of it, and looking forward to doing more of these. So GG's.